Welcome everybody back to the Mediocre Black Woman. And I am here with Pedro. He is like one of our OG day one subscribers, and he writes really insightful pieces here on Substack as well. So Pedro, I'm gonna let you take it over and kind of like introduce yourself, and because you left a lot of things before you got to this point. So we're talking about shifts today, and you've made some major ones over the last like almost like year, and beyond, but like there's been some major transformations and transitions. So why don't you start by telling folks who
Yeah,
you are, what you left, and what you write about on Substack?
yeah. Who I am is Pedro Silva, Senhorinha Silva, which is actually significant because my middle name means little lady, and for a long time I never wanted to use it, and so recently I decided a couple of years ago I was like, you know what, let me just use it and let it have its way with my journey, um, and by way of what I've left behind, I'd say that I was raised like a really strict fundamentalist Christian. And along the way, I found myself now in this unity community, which I'm learning about. But at the same time as I'm learning about it, I know that it matches the essence of who I've been for, most of my life. And that was a person who fundamentally, to use that word, I wanted to love God and love people, and that's basically what I was taught. But in the context, strangely, the place who taught me how to do that or told me that I should do that wouldn't let me do that,
Mm,
and it's been a perpetual kind of cycles upon cycles of just living into that. And then the environments have changed around me, but my core essence has been pretty much the same.
okay, that makes sense. And we talked about a lot of things when we first had our like one-to-one convo. And you mentioned like I kind of want to, and we never got to talk about it, so I'm kind of like getting all I can get out of you right now. But you had mentioned the language of liberation that you were
hmm
using and how kind of that contributed to your own liberation. But how did that play out when you tried to bring that kind of like knowledge and wisdom to the forefront?
I mean, starting out, being raised in a black church, um, not too long after MLK left the stage, you know, um, I assumed that our with the desire for our liberation was just going to be inherent in how we lived our lives. It took me a long time to realize that a lot of especially growing up in the South, a lot of the ways we were taught had embedded white supremacy, embedded um, slave mentality, for lack of a better expression, and a lot of the institutional colonial constructs were embedded in our like pursuit of liberation. And so I think like for a lot of us, we didn't think we'd be free until we left this world. And so we invested our ideas of freedom in heaven or some other place. And our ideas of justice, we gave it like a really long time horizon instead of it being a present now reality. And I did not realize that's how we thought until the older I got and the more they tried to cram me in the box, the more I started realizing, like, are we like operating from like a slave brain or something? you know? And and it's sad to say that I found that we do. A lot of times we basically preach our own colonialization, we preach our own subjugation, we preach our own oppression, and it's couched in language that sounds liberative or liberating, but it's always in the unreachable future.
Mm.
And then the last thing I'll say about it is I think that like this $5 word that I learned in seminary is eschatology, or like the ending of things. And there's a lot of investment in like the rapture or end times or all these things. And I have come to realize, especially after September 23rd, when some people thought the rapture was coming again a couple months ago, I grew up hearing about the rapture all day long, all the time. That's all we talked about. And I, as an adult, realized that when you think your liberation comes after death, then of course you're going to invest in the afterlife because you don't really believe that you're either capable, worthy, or deserving of it now. And so there always was a pushback, and people would say stuff like, "Oh, like white people aren't going to let you do this," like different things that I used to hear when I was growing up, and
Mhm.
it was kind of heartbreaking because I was like, "Dang, we like." I think we're doing this to ourselves. And I have a friend who his last name is Silva too, but there's no relation. He wrote a book called I think it was called Racism Without Racists or something like
Mm.
that.
Mhm.
And it taught that because of this, the way the system's been set up and the construct is if you took all the races away from the planet right now, we would still exhibit the same behavior because it's so enculturated into our institutions. So the language of liberation feels like a threat to institutional constructs.
I never thought about that. Investing in the afterlife. Oh my god. Yeah, and, like, when I get to heaven and, like, wow. And all these expressions and things that are in the Bible, not in the Bible, but that keep you, small in this
Mm,
lifetime too.
mm,
That's
right.
so I never even put that together. Wow. Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So, I guess my question to you is then, like I said, as you started trying to bring that to the forefront, um, what do you feel like was the biggest challenge in the mentality? Like, meaning why cling so heavily to that ideology?
Why do we do it? You're asking like in general? Like, I mean, I would ultimately say it's probably just like the fear of death, you
Mhm.
know, because it even says in the Bible that people sin, quote unquote, that sin comes from the fear of death. And so, like, if you kind of like extrapolate that a little bit, it's like death is the loss from which we can never recover. Like there's a lot of different losses that we can have in our lives. Like you can be in a relationship, "Well, I'm gonna get a new relationship, or I have money, I can get more money, or I can learn to live without money. But if you lose this thing, then it's like, wow, that's like the end of me. You know what I mean? And I think that the fear of that gives us like a kind of investment, like I said, an investment in the afterlife is
Yeah.
like an investment of my continual existence. And so we don't want to threaten the idea that we'll have a future better existence after this. Like we're so like kind of attached to this corporeal idea of who we are, and we want it to continue in perpetuity. And so we don't want to risk anything. Like I've had friends that have watched my journey and then said to me, like, man, I I actually hope you're right, but I'm not willing to risk my salvation on it.
Oh,
And they
wow.
and they've used that language. And then I'm like, well, if you wish I'm right, that means in your mind you already agree with me. Well, you think that just the idea of God that you worship is you can trick that idea of God? Because if you telling me you wish that I'm right, but you don't want to risk your salvation already risked according to that formula because you wishing I'm right. And if you like, so it's like what in the not thinking is that? You know what I mean? But that's how some people roll. They're so used to trying to kind of manipulate and manage perceptions that they even do it with God or whatever they think of God is. So, like, if I'm talking to you and I want you to think I'm cool and I don't open my mouth and say anything, I could be thinking all kinds of crazy stuff, but I could try to say things that impress you or whatever the case may be. And you may or may not be able to pick that up off of me because we got these, like, these bodies. But
Mhm.
when you're trying to trick your own illusion of God, like that's a bunch of loops. You know what I mean? To be in my like, well, I actually agree with this guy, but I don't want to go to hell. So let me just act like I don't. And God won't know because God's too dumb to realize that it's like, what's the point? You might as well just go all in, you know?
No, that's so true because then again, like I think people forget about like the spiritual aspect and the religious aspect. You
Yeah,
can't just do the religious aspect and forget the spiritual part because, they go together for a reason. Like your
yeah,
heart and your actions got to be in alignment in that
yeah,
concept, right?
yeah.
Okay, so I feel like this is a really good transition to something that you said behind the scenes,
Hmm.
before we got on here. So you had mentioned, right, that you in the time of your shifts, that most of the shifts that have happened in your life have been because they've happened to you because you were forced to. Very guilty of that too. Um, and this time it sounds like you have now made shifts that you're conscious of and you're not like delaying the
Hmm.
process. So, again, we're talking about heart and mind being in connection. And now, okay, you're consciously making the shifts. So, first, before we talk about the actual shift, how do you feel like that change in mindset has supported your development, your growth?
I mean, I'm still learning from it. I actually had this epiphany this morning. It might be in anticipation of this conversation. Um, my when I was younger, I kind of grew up in the hood, right? So, and to make it worse, my mom used to make me wear church clothes. That's the only clothes she would buy me. So I had to wear like church clothes to school in the hood. And not only that, this chick, excuse me, calling my mom a chick, made me carry a briefcase. Yes. And a trench coat. She had me wearing like what's it called? A Burlington Coat Factory trench coat and a little beanie hat and a briefcase and dress clothes and in the hood
I
in
know they were
Norfolk,
capping on you. They
man.
were capping on
And I
you.
was like, Mama, please. And she was like, No, you're gonna be a gentleman. You're gonna be this, you're gonna be that. And I was like, if I survive, you know what I mean? And she had me and my brother looking like fools. It's a lot of stories about that. But but it was like I just grew up in that context. And one of my things was my family were like they were gangsters when I talk about church. They were like church gangsters. So like if they thought you were going to hell, they would say it at the funeral. Like they'd just be like, "Well, you ain't gonna see Pookie because Pookie is in hell. So
I'm s-
if y'all want to see anybody else in your family, you just gonna have to get right with God because Pookie's in hell. So don't even think about Pookie no more. You know what I mean? And I was like, oh my God. And like, I was like, man, I don't want my grandma. I thought I was gonna die. It's funny now, but when I was younger, I thought there's no way
you
I'm
were
surviving.
scared. Yeah.
I thought there's no way I'm surviving my neighborhood because first I was getting called church boy, getting punked, like all this other stuff. And so I was like getting jumped and all kinds of crazy stuff. And I was like, man, I decided there's no way I'm making it to 18. And I just like gave up. But I didn't want my grandma to be embarrassed at my funeral. So I was like, okay, well, when they take me out, I got to be doing something like good because I don't want my grandma to be like, have a heart attack at my funeral. And they be like, well, my nickname was, my name is Pedro, but one of my nicknames was Puka. So I was like, no one calls me that anymore. So my uncle. But anyway, but I didn't want to be like, Puka's in hell, and my grandma be like, no, Lord. And my grandma used to think that I was her only grandkid she was going to see in heaven. She used to tell me that, like, well, I ain't gonna see nobody in glory but you, baby. And so I was like, oh Jesus, because my other family was turned to Muslims, and then some of them turned like kind of like Buddhisty.
Okay.
So my grandma was like, oh, it's just me and you. So I was like, I don't want to embarrass this lady. So let me just keep my stuff together. And I thought when she died, I was free from that. And I just realized this morning that I wasn't.
Okay.
And now I'm like 50 now. And I said, oh my God, that joint is still in there. Like I didn't know because it was so like, down there. But I realized it because I was thinking about some of the shifts I made. And part of the reason why it was so like I had to get snatched out of context was because my grandma still wanted me to be like, fundamentalist, like holiness type Christian. So
Right.
I unconsciously was resisting the shifts that were coming up in my life because I still had that thing that I don't want to embarrass my grandma. And
Mm.
even though she's dead, I didn't want like I found out my cousin died a couple of days ago. And unconsciously, I was like, one more person I don't have to think about, which is messed up. but, but, but underneath it, it
It's
was one of my old school, old time religion family members
mhm.
that I like, even though my grandma was gone, they still could have been like, oh, girl, that boy was, he's not a fundamentalist Christian anymore, girl. And you know what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
I said, oh my God, this thing still got me. So I think that was what my resistance has been.
Okay.
And I'm imagining now that I'm aware of it as of this morning, it may even accelerate some of my shifts by just going along with the shift. Cause I always see them coming. I'll just be like, no, please, no shift. I don't want to shift. And I'm doing some Donald Trump stuff. I don't want to shift. But but I was that dude, I know he's been resisting many shifts.
Oh yeah.
And he's full of shift.
Oh,
but but at any rate, I just kind of yeah. So that's what that's what I realized this morning that I think like because even now that I'm in this like new unity space, which people would say like, oh, that dude's gone from Christianity at this point. I thought like if my grandma was alive, she might die. She's like, oh, Pedro's a unity minister. She's like, oh, he's gone. I guess it's just gonna be me in heaven now, you know. So I think that's I think that's I realized this morning that's underneath it probably. So I'm
okay.
not some work to do.
Yeah, well, I mean, I know these folks, like these, old time folks in your family are passing on. But how do you feel like you're gonna work through that? Because that seems like it's deep in there for you to have like resisted stuff that for your own path is really gonna help you. So, what do you feel like the first step is that you're gonna take?
I mean, one of the things I've been really doing is like looking at nature and how everything else, nothing resists the laws of nature except for humans. You know what I mean? So I've been kind of looking at like even myself and I'm like, well, maybe this is, even though it feels like I'm sometimes putting up resistance and then getting pulled into these, more expanded spaces, it's also like if I were a plant, like in nature, and I was just blossoming, blooming, whatever the case may be, my shell or whatever it's called, it would be hard. And then as I'm growing, it would have to break open, expand, and break open, expand, and flower. And like, so maybe there's a natural element,
Mhm.
excuse me, of my flowering into my life that I just kind of have to accept that there's a natural way that nature is like naturally revealing me to me. And so I can like lean into it and relax into it because all this stuff happened whether I wanted it to or not. And many of the things that happened, it was precursors to that thing happening. Like even me being in unity now for 2 weeks, like a person 15 years ago told me, Pedro, you more of a unity person. And I said, I don't know anything about that. And then they were like, and they said it to me several times, and I kept saying, like, why you keep saying that? And like, because to myself, and I'm just a Christian. I'm just a regular Christian. But now I'm working there. You know what I mean? And I was like, dang, they said it. And then one of my mentors is a guy named Carlton Pearson, who was a bishop, like holiness, Pentecostal, Kojic, like Church of God in Christ.
Oh yeah.
And he had some kind of shift a bunch of years ago, lost his church and all this other stuff. They made a Netflix movie about it and everything.
Mhm.
But I got kicked out of my fundamentalist church before he did, but I wasn't like a pastor or anything. I was just a dude. And I went through all this stuff, and people said to me, oh, you need to go to Carlton Pearson's Azusa Festival. He'll get you back in line, trying to make me get back more fundamentalist. Then 5 years later, he got the boot. And then after he got the boot, when I was in seminary, I met him while I was in seminary, and then we stayed in each other's life until he died. But he went from like 0 to 100. Like he was like Pentecostal next, then it come to Sunday. The next Sunday, he's like the movie's called Come Sunday, by the way. He goes and opens up the next Sunday. I had a revelation from God. No one's going to hell. God loves everybody. And they're like, "What'd you say, fool?" And then he like lost everything. And I had like a slow burn. You know what I mean? Like over a bunch of years. And even when I talked to him, I was like, "Dang, man, didn't you know that was gonna happen?" He was like, "Nah, man. I thought they're gonna be happy." I was like, "No, they love their hell, man. They're not gonna give that up."
Mm.
And I wasn't internally, I was where he was, but I still had stuff on my journey that I had to walk through and, become a pastor in a regular church and go through different experiences and all this other stuff. And now I'm on the other side of my flowering. So it's like, I kind of have to accept that a lot of it is natural for some people. Like,
Mhm.
that's what I'm accepting it's like convenient because I'm choosing to stop resisting it and I'm starting to think it's natural at the same time. So it's like the net effect is kind of nullified. But I'm trying to just kind of go with the flow and just be like, all right, I don't know Jack. I'm getting out of my own life's business. Like my life is not my business, and just being curious about it.
You know, it's funny because I was talking to my therapist the other day, and she had asked me something, and I was like, "You know what? That's above my pay grade. We gonna have to talk to them because I don't know."
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I feel that. So, it's so funny because I have these conversations all the time too about, like, the devil, about hell, and, like, I had someone tell me, "I know you're going through a lot. Don't isolate yourself because that's where the devil can find you." And I was
Hmm.
like, "Well, why don't we say instead, God loves when people are connected and they're in
Hmm.
community." I'm like, "What is this obsession with the devil and hell and all this stuff?" So, you're giving me a new perspective today on all of this. So, it's really fascinating. Okay, now let's talk about your shift into unity. Like, how
Yeah.
did that come up?
That is also just a thing that happened. Cause like a few years ago, after I quit being a pastor, the Unity community that I'm now serving, I started doing like teaching diversity training and stuff like that. So they hired the company I was working for to do their diversity training.
Yeah.
So I was there doing diversity training and we had like 7 sessions or whatever. And interestingly, I said, man, that lady who told me I belong in Unity, now I'm at a Unity church doing diversity training. I said, oh, maybe she tapped into that, not thinking I'm going to end up being a minister there. And then, that was in 2022. So it's been a 3-year
Wow.
trajectory.
Mhm.
But like during that time, my wife started going to that Unity church. I said, oh, I'm working there now. She's like, I passed it so many times. I'm going to go check it out. And so she started checking it out. And then I started working at another Christian church. And I was at the Christian church for this other Christian church for a while last year.
Mhm.
And then I wanted to stay, but something wouldn't let me stay. So I didn't. And then this year, the Unity community, hey, Evelyn, the Unity community uh, asked me to speak on Father's Day. And so I said, all right, I'll speak on Father's Day. And then after that happened, honest to God, I felt something be like, the other Unity church in the town is going to ask you to speak, which they did. And I
Mhm.
said, boy, that's weird. Then I felt like, I think they're going to ask me to be a minister there. It went across my consciousness. And then the other Unity church asked me. Then the other one asked me. And then it like worked out that I'm at the one I'm at. And it's like nothing that I efforted to cause or anything like that. And then that's what really made me go, dude, I got to stay out of my life because I didn't put in any, even the Christian church I was serving out here in Boulder. I came to this town on vacation and
Mhm.
visited the church. And my wife told somebody I had gone to seminary and I used to be a minister because I had already decided I didn't want to be a pastor more than once. And then next thing you know, a couple weeks later, I get a Facebook friend request from the minister saying, hey, I don't know if you know, but two of our ministers left and we need somebody to come in short notice for 1-year contract and da da da. And my wife wanted to live here and we were living in Boston. And I said, oh, for 1 year, I guess I could do it. And then I never left. So,
Wow.
but I was on vacation. I wasn't even trying to look for. I never applied for a pastor job. The whole time I've been a pastor, I've only applied to the first church I worked for, and then
Mhm.
after that, I never applied to anything else. I just found myself in a situation that somebody asked me.
Yeah. Mhm.
So and no matter what I do to get out of it, it just keeps coming back in different forms.
Well, they're telling you something then definitely. And I saw Evelyn said yeah, Unity. I went to Unity in when I was for summer in Sacramento. I used to go with my best friend's mom. We would go to Unity together. It was one of my favorite services actually. And my friend was her memorial was there too.
Yeah, you
Yeah, so
mentioned
beautiful.
that.
Yeah, beautiful place. Um, wow, I love that. So yeah, you staying out of your own out of your life
Yeah,
and just accepting it.
yeah.
So what do you feel like you learned, like, in addition to like minding your own business, what do you feel like you learned as well in that resistance period when you were like kind of, fighting the things or, stuff?
I think that a lot of times, uh, relationships that we have with people kind of shape our trajectory.
Mhm.
And a lot of the choices that I made and some of the choices I didn't make, a lot of it had something to do with maintaining a certain relationship. Like with my grandma, I just didn't want to embarrass my grandma. So that shaped a lot of what I did and how I showed up because like hurting her was more important than not hurting her was more important to me than whatever I might have thought I wanted to do. I was like, it's not worth it if it's gonna hurt my grandma's feelings, right? Even if my grandma was wrong, like I still just like I didn't want to hurt this lady's feelings because she was kind of like the only person that was like a little sweet to me and like nice to me because I grew up like my dad left when I was young. I was like the oldest in the house. We being poor and like going through all this stuff. And it was like I have a lot of people that treated me like she was like, oh, you grandma's baby, my little sugar foot baby, baby. And I have a lot of people doing that. So I was like, well, the one lady that does that, I'm not going to break her heart, So I just kept myself in check for that sake. So I think that a lot of my resistance was relational, you
Mhm,
know? And this might sound strange, but one of the things like when I went through some really painful things with some of the faith communities I've been a part of, and it tempted me to be done with the whole Jesus story too, because the way that it was used abusively.
mhm,
But what I learned from it was this idea that, like, a lot of times they say about Jesus kind of being in the form of a human
mhm.
and like he subjected himself to humanity. And I think that we all do that on different levels. But it's always relational, right? So,
Yeah.
like, if Jesus, using him as an example, loved his mom, his friends, or whatever, and maybe he could have been like, I ain't got to deal with this, and like float off or whatever, right?
Mhm.
But he's just like, nah, I'm gonna go through this because this is where y'all are. And so I love y'all. So I'm gonna be where y'all are, even though being where y'all are is causing me discomfort and death. You know what I mean? And I think that there's something to that tension. There's something to that relational bond. And there's probably reasons why he used marriage as an analogy for a lot of his teachings. Is like sometimes you go through stuff with a person you're in a relationship with that you would not go through on your own or even with your children. So even though like my kids, like they talk to me about stuff I don't care about what they're talking about, but I listen. Like I listen, I go through it or whatever the case may be. And sometimes on the inside, I'm like, I don't care, but I don't tell them. I just sit there and go, oh yeah, that's cool, baby, you know, because I'm being there with them. That's where they are,
Yeah.
So I think there's something benefit to a degree of holding that tension and not shifting without some people that you have deep relationship with. There's something to it. I think it can get toxic too, where you in like an abusive situation or something terrible, and then you trying to stay with something or somebody who cannot make that shift, but they're dragging you down, dragging them down, and everybody's suffering. There's got to be a time to say, like the Bible says, like kick the dust off your feet. Like there's a time for that. But I think that that's something that we have to just kind of like navigate. So I feel like even though in as an individual, I might have been holding myself back in some ways, I built relational bonds in that season of holding myself back.
Mm, mhm.
So it's like kind of balancing that out.
That makes sense. I mean, I feel like that's one of the biggest pain points for so many people is relationships. And, I feel like one of the things that I've learned through relationships is how to be in a relationship, but also how to still like honor myself in the process.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, and that has been like, especially this year, it has been a really big test for me is like my relationships with folks and um how to honor that while still going through all the shifts and all the changes and, keeping and maintaining your sanity and still focusing on yourself, right? And where
Yeah.
to draw the line at because yeah, that is the biggest challenge. But my sister said something before that I was like, She's like, sometimes relationships are inconvenient. I was
Yeah,
like,
they are.
yeah,
Yeah. I mean, I haven't been in a relationship that hasn't been inconvenient
yeah.
if you have an agenda. But there's this thing. One of the good things about my family, some of them being Muslim, is I learned some Islamic things through them. And there's this hadith, which is like the sayings of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. That says, um, marriage is 50% of religion. And
Mm,
so if you were in a marriage, you can practice your religion because treating people the way you want to be treated is contained in the marriage. Loving your enemy sometimes is in the marriage. Like all of these different things, you get to practice your religion in the marriage. So it's like that's the same, but that can be true for any relational framework if there's a commitment. So maybe like commitment is 50% of religion.
I think so, yeah,
Yeah.
because yeah, as someone who was married, I will say, like, that is one of the biggest personal development, like,
Mhm.
grounds is marriage for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, relationship that you're committed to, like, I had this, "Oh, see you later. Thank you for coming."
Yep.
Um, I had I've had friends where I've had to say, "Look, we're gonna be in this together, like, I want to stay friends. Do you
Mhm.
wanna stay friends? Okay,
Mhm.
then we're gonna work through this. It might be
Right.
uncomfortable, but we're gonna do it, you know?"
Right. Yeah.
So, yeah. Okay, well, I'm excited for you and your transition and your shift and that you're not resisting it anymore.
Yeah.
We all aspire to some of that. I mean, I do stuff, but I grumble anyway at the same time while I'm doing it. I'm like, "Yeah, Imma do this," but, so maybe I could pray for a better attitude about
Yeah.
how I enter it. I'm like, "Y'all want me to do this right now? Okay.
Yeah.
Alright."
One thing I'll if we're winding up, I'll leave with this, just, or at least make sure I say this, is there's another teaching in the Bible that says it's like better to be single. If you Because the reason why is because it said if you're single, you can kind of like follow God, but when you're in a relationship, you feel like you're concerned about your husband or your wife, right? Or
Mhm.
whatever the case may be. And there's a lot of teachings that also kind of go into that space. And I have discovered in between relationships when I have been single, I have been able to flow in and out of things, a lot more fluidly because I'm
Yes.
not thinking about how the other person might take what I'm, communicating. And a lot of times we take language for granted. I was a linguist professionally before, like a Mandarin linguist. And what I learned from that is that a lot of us make the assumption that the way we use language is the same way another person uses language. And we don't pause to say, like, okay, what did you mean by that? Because if I would have said what you said, I would have meant that. I would have meant this. Is that what you meant when you said it? And then the person says yes or no. Then you can, like, so okay, well, in the future, if I use that language, understand this is what I mean, and I'll try to understand what you mean. And that's like a beautiful thing if people could do it. But generally speaking, there's so much nuance in language. There's so much like contextual things, how you grew up. You know what I mean? So like all of those things, and we take it for granted. So when we do, it causes a lot of kind of hiccups and distress and all these other things, and we just don't pay attention to that. And like even things like hell, like that in the Bible, there's no such thing as the hell that they talk about in religion, because the thing that they were talking about was this place called the Valley of Hinnom, because in the Bible it's called Gehenna, and they translated it to hell. And they also take the word that mean grave. They also translate that to hell, but it was the Valley of Hinnom where there used to be a religion that sacrificed babies there, and then later it became the place where they burned trash. And that's so Jesus was using all these analogies. So he was like, doing this and this and this will be as if you in Gehenna, where there's wailing and gnashing of teeth because it's like stuff stinking and burning and like, you know. And then it got later translated hundreds and hundreds of years later from Dante's levels of hell, from Dante's Inferno, and that made people compare, like transpose those on top of each other, and then think, oh, this is where we're gonna go, and this is gonna be, and we just the equivalent would be watching a modern day movie and thinking it's real life when somebody tried to give you like a illustration or something, analogy, and
Mhm.
people start thinking it's a real thing, and that's hard for people to swallow because they don't want to think they're wrong. Because like one of the last conversations I had with my grandma before she died, she said, "Baby, I think somebody's telling your mom some crazy stuff. I don't know who it is." And she was worried about my mom. And I said, "Well, what did my mom say?" And then when she told me, I was like, "Oh, that was me." And my grandma was like, "Oh no, baby." And so she was like nervous about my soul.
Mhm.
And I said, "Well, grandma, what if you're not 100% correct on some things?" And she said, "Well, I refuse to believe I was teaching Sunday school wrong for 50 years." And then I said, "Well, if you refuse to believe it, but you're wrong, you're going to keep practicing something is wrong because your own ego, you refuse to believe it. You ain't even asking the question." And then she went back and looked at some stuff in the Bible that she had been teaching a long time. And she called me and said, "Oh my goodness, I might have said some stuff wrong. And she asked me a question that I don't know if she died with this question in her heart, but she said, "Do you think I'll see your aunt in heaven?" Because my aunt's a Muslim. And I said, "Well, I mean, if you're open to the possibility." I was like, "I don't know. I ain't been there, so I don't know. Yeah, maybe I have. I don't know." And then I said, "But maybe you're open to possibility." And my aunt told me she had this very interesting conversation with my grandma before she died, and my grandma alluded to the fact that maybe they would see each other again.
Mhm.
And for years, my grandma just knew that she was going to be in hell,
That's so
and
sweet.
so
That
she
is so
died
sweet.
with a question. And sometimes questions are better than answers.
That's sweet. That's really sweet. I love
Yeah,
to see that though, because like, my grandma is at that stage where she'll, like she just is open, like, she calls and apologizes for things, or she'll, ask for a different perspective, and I'm like,
that's
"Okay."
awesome.
Yeah, because it's just, I feel like well, from her words, as she's gotten older, she started to reflect on different things and
Yeah,
thinks back over her life, and and she has questions and she thinks about how she did things, and I'm like, that's a really beautiful place to still be in and be able to articulate that right now, you know?
yeah, yeah. Mine, she apologized, but before she left, she also apologized because I was born left-handed, and she forced me to be right-handed.
Oh,
And,
okay.
and she apologized for that. And I was like, "Grandma, that was so long ago." And she's like, I just should have let you be left-handed, baby." And I was like, "Okay."
So wait, do you write with your left hand now too, or you just
I can do both, but
okay.
my left hand is uglier and my right hand is ugly. But my left hand is uglier because I didn't do it for years.
Yeah.
I'm pretty. I can play ping pong with my left hand
Okay.
instead of my right hand, so it's weird.
Oh wow. Yeah, that's so sweet. She's going over her life. She's like, "Why did I do that?" They have
Yeah,
they're humans too, and I think, like I feel like, if one thing so we do, like, the Flowers for the Living conversation where we, talk to folks and we ask them what they would love for the, younger generations to know, but something that I feel like for the older generations that I would love for them to know is that they don't have to have all the answers, and it's okay if
exactly.
they don't know, and it's okay if they make mistakes and they, like, say
Yeah.
that they've made the mistake. Um so yeah, you're loosed from that, you're released from that,
Hmm.
um, because yeah, they don't have all the answers. They're doing the best that they can. Like, I feel like now as an adult, I'm like, oh, I get it. Y'all are figuring it out in real time too.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Got it. Yeah.
Yep. Cool.
Yeah.
I appreciate you welcoming me up here and like having this space to be able to like, I heard you talk about your shifts. I said, "Oh shoot, man, I'm going through those shifts too." So,
hmm
yep.
Yeah, I'm glad that we were able to talk about it because yeah, it's I feel like one thing I would love for us to do more in general, just as people, is talk through the challenges. Not to say like, oh, I'm gonna sit in this and I'm gonna ruminate on it and I'm gonna let it control me. But I feel like sometimes when people get to hear what you've done during your shifts or what you've done during your like challenges or your threshold moments, it really helps to like kind of put into words some of what you're going through. 'Cause sometimes I think we think that we're the only ones going through what we're going through, and
Right.
it's not the case. So it's just really nice to sit with people and then you hear things and you're like, "Oh, I could adopt more of that," or, "Oh, yeah, I might need to mind my own business when it
Right.
comes to my life,"
Right.
and let them handle it, but still, you still put in some effort here and there, but let them handle it, and when
Mm.
you move, that's it.
Yeah.
So I appreciate you coming on and sharing your story, your background, and
Yeah.
I would love to hear updates. I'm sure they would too. Love to hear
Yeah.
updates about, especially around the piece of, you working out some of, the the generational teaching around, the fear of, going to hell and,
Right.
so I would love to hear some updates on that as you continue to work through it. So thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate it. Thanks, whoever joined up here. I appreciate y'all too.
Yes, absolutely. Well, we'll see you all next time. Thank you for coming, Pedro.
Thank you.
And if anybody wants to come on and talk about their shifts, man, I am open. We're not podcasting right now. We're just kind of just prepping for the next season, which is coming up. So let us know if you want to come on, chit chat with me. I'm open. But thank you all for coming, for being here, for showing Pedro some love and some support. And we will see you guys next time. Thank you,
Sweet.
Pedro.
Thanks. Take care. Bye.
Bye bye.